All right, welcome back. Just getting back from the Bravo Company fall semester with one Shepherd. Of course, in 2 weeks, we have the Alpha Company semester there in Missouri, central Missouri. Really happy to see yet another year coming to fruition here. I will say, both bragging and also honest excuse, or anyway, explanation, is if you're growing frustrated with the fact that for the last 2 years, every single semester of One Shepherd has sold out months in advance, so are we. I'm told this is a great problem to have, and at some level I believe that, but I gotta be honest, I don't prefer this. I don't like turning people away from training, and we are. Anywhere from a half a dozen to a dozen easily every single semester we simply don't have seats for. So, I promise you, we are looking at expanding operations many different ways in 2023 and 2024. We're looking at everything from expanding our battle equipment, battlefield equipment and simulators. We are also talking to the facilities so that we can hopefully, over the next year or two, significantly expand our operations. And so look for, in the coming years, more semesters, more locations, greater capacity, all right? Nonetheless, it has been a wonderful 2 years. We've never seen this kind of growth before, and our risk, of course, of growing too fast is that we'll lose quality. So we're being very, very careful and very purposeful about this growth. So, coming back to it after a couple of week break because of that semester, I want to jump right back into the OPFOR series. And it seems that since OPFOR 5, Irregular and Hybrid Threat, is the newest edition out there, coming out in August, I wanted to start there. And I promised when I was promoting this that I would begin with cultural studies of this. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. And what I mean by that is, I think the appropriate place to start is the Insurgent life cycle. Now, today I'm going to tell you a story as it was told to me almost 20 years ago. I can no longer remember that man's name, and I feel terrible about that. I don't know where he is, and so it's hard to look up somebody that you can remember a face but no name. But I will give credit where credit's due. This story was told to me through the University of Foreign Military and Cultural Studies, UFMCS, more colloquially known as Red Team University at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. That is now defunct, and that too is a shame. But hopefully, rumor on the street is that Congress has dictated there will be a studies on and training on asymmetric warfare, specifically unconventional warfare and irregular warfare. This comes from the old UFMCS Red Team University. And I think we'll start with an overview. The overview of the Insurgent life cycle seeks to dispel several myths. Myth number one is that insurgencies are born from illegitimate acts, and that is not true. Insurgencies are born from legitimate grievances, and the whole entire struggle is towards a legitimate solution. We should also say insurgencies prefer convention, as in conventional warfare, but asymmetric warfare is their coping mechanism because they simply can't match the military might of a conventional army, at least not in their early years. Then the life cycle pretty much goes from political action committees, that is again trying to seek resolutions to grievances through legitimacy, then to activists going into that gray area, they become political activists. From activists, the next step is they go into insurgent. Insurgent, they go into guerrilla warfare after seeking sanctuary. That's a critical medium step there. But then they move to guerrilla warfare, and from guerrilla forces they then transition into conventional forces, or at least they seek to. From conventional forces they seek conventional victories so that they become a legitimate government, and there's legitimacy in their governance. And the final is that time is not on the side of the insurgency in the vast majority of cases. Time is on the side of the government, the reigning government powers. There is a real danger as time goes on that an insurgency will slide down and evolve, or rather devolve, into criminal acts and crime cartels. So let's get to the board. Let's take a look at the life cycle of an insurgency. This is the story of the Strawberry United Territories and the Blueberry People's Republic. And so both of these countries are agrarian farming communities. The Strawberry United Territories, big surprise, their principal product and export would be, that's correct, strawberries. Blueberry People's Republic, once again, it's farming and it's blueberries. So the story goes that at different times, the blueberry and strawberry lands and peoples often traded across their porous border. At other times in their history, the political and economic situation would worsen for one or the other, and we'd see the border close. And so then you can understand that in the Strawberry United Territories, what do they value most? Well, of course, strawberries. And in the Blueberry People's Republic, what do they value most? Well, of course, blueberries. And that means, like I said, in different times they're open to trade. Well, in the Blueberry People's Republic, up comes this new prime minister, and the prime minister says, you know what I really love? I love blueberries. And you know what I detest? I detest strawberries. I really just can't stand them. Their seeds are on the outside. They sometimes go mushy in my milk and ice cream. Blah, I hate strawberries. So the Blueberry People's Republic decides that they are going to limit and highly tax any import of strawberries. And the strawberry people, they're saying, what gives? Not this again. And so they're saying, look, let's open the border. Let's have free trade. And the blueberry government is having none of this. Well, the people in the capital of Blueberry Land, and for that matter, the people working in the farms, well, they can't have their blueberry breakfast, with their strawberry lunch and strawberry dinners. They say, hey, we like berries, but they can't. And so what comes here in this example is a legitimate grievance whereby the people of the Blueberry People's Republic say, hey, government, we have strong economic ties in the past with strawberry land. Let's allow strawberries in. And oh, by the way, we can export more blueberries that way too. It's because strawberry isn't going to stand for this, and it's going to be a 1-for-1. So they're saying, give us more strawberries. Give us diversity of food. Give us whatever our legitimate grievance is with this government. Please, let's find a solution for this. But the blueberry government ran on an anti-strawberry platform, and so they dig their heels in, and as the years wear on, blueberry more and more shuts down the import of strawberries to the point where strawberries, there's this black market that develops for strawberries in blueberry land. And this grates the blueberry government even farther. If there's a black market in strawberry land for blueberries, the strawberry land looks the other way or even sanctions it. And so strawberry land is very happy, blueberry land is not very happy, and so the people take their grievance up to the government. Now, this is the first thing they're doing. They're forming political action committees, and that's the first step. We're going to form PACs, political action committees. And we're going to try to force the government to do what we want them to do, because we want strawberries. Well, as this way goes on and on and on, and we get nowhere, then we take it from, we don't have representation maybe anymore. Blueberry kicks out all of our representative government in the capital city. And so, okay, now we don't even have representation. So we're going to become activists, and we're going to say, okay, well, we're going to have all these people out there in blueberry land, and they're going to have signs, and they're going to, yeah, give us strawberries, The activists start, chanting and marching and all of this other stuff. And instead of paying attention to this, the blueberry government then uses information operations or propaganda to label these people as just that, as activists, as sympathetic to the strawberry people, and they're not real blueberrians. They say, no, these guys are illegitimate and everything else. Well, the Political Action Committee to activists, when the activists can't get that, then they start taking on illegitimate activity. Again, that may be smuggling. It's often economic. But if there are, let's say, Blueberry says, we're going to put checkpoints on our border opening, and so that you can't just smuggle in. We're going to tighten down on that. And so, again, initially activist is protest. It then goes to some kind of usually illicit activity. And then it will go one step further where the activists will start violence against property. That is not attacking the checkpoint people, but they're attacking the checkpoints themselves. And so maybe they tear them apart. They come in, they're like, nah, we don't want this anymore. And so they're shutting these things down. And of course, there's several things going on. You know, those checkpoints cost money. They take time to build. This is an insult to the government, and it also has some potentially economic impact. And so they're tearing these down so that they can continue going. You see what's happening is that the activists are stepping into illegitimate violence, even violence against property, and now they are moving into the terrain of insurgency. Of course, their insurgency is really interesting because they had that political action committee. So they had, they had PAC representatives in the villages and PAC representatives across the country, as well as PAC representatives inside of the cities. And so these go to activists, and then they go to insurgent. And so the insurgent builds on that infrastructure, and there's lots of different variants of this infrastructure. But what's really interesting is inside the infrastructures, they only know the next person in the line, in the chain. They don't know everybody. They don't know who are the highest levels and the lowest levels. This village won't know what's going on in this village, and this village won't know what's going on in the cities. And initially, when it was all legitimate, that's more out of just convenience. But as it moves towards insurgency, that becomes part of their operational security, communication security, is that the insurgency has a great measure of anonymity. And so what happens is, typically about this time, the Blueberry People's Republic government will overreact. And they will strike down and move, they'll move tanks and all that good stuff. Here's my tank. Yes, I know this is... Hey, I guess it's an M4 Sherman. There's my tank. And they move tanks and military personnel to the villages and anywhere else they think that, well, man, we've got to crack down on these people. And so they move military into the villages, and there's this crackdown that goes way too far. It's seen as an overreach of government, but it's also seen as an oppression of individual freedoms and liberties, commerce, and everything else. Moreover, the people are saying, wait a minute, why are we being punished out here for something, groups inside your city are doing? This creates the tinderbox. So we talk about the match thrown in the tinderbox. Well, this creates the tinderbox. Now, let me stop here and say how critical that is. We were an insurgency. The United States of America was born of an insurgency. We had taxation without representation. That was our legitimate grievance. We tried to petition the king. The king says, what are you going to do? And, and paints these people as rabble-risers, and then sends the world's best trained military into Boston and New York and Philadelphia and where not. What happens is we wind up with several different things. Again, the insurgency rises. They do first property against violence against property. You know it as the Boston Tea Party. Then they actually attack military outposts. Again, not harming anyone, but stealing military goods. And then lo and behold, the Boston Massacre comes up. We send armed men to the villages and to the cities, and then we have Crispus Attucks get shot in the face or whatever, and we have a bunch of people be killed in the Boston Massacre. And this enrages the people. And so that's what I say when this is a tinderbox. It just takes one strike of a match, and we've got a shooting war on our hands. What had been up to that point legitimate grievance to illegitimate use of force now becomes violence against people. And so the government starts shooting its own people. Well, this sends people running into the arms of the insurgency. The insurgency then tries to counter that by attacking where and when necessary, ambushing and attacking its perceived enemies, right? Bang, so we have conflict here. Oh no, and everything's coming, the wheels are coming off the cart here. So that's the next thing, is that insurgencies then move into illegitimate use of force against humans. And the government does the same. What the government does at this point is it says, well, you rabble rousers, and it seeks to round up all of the lead people that it says, well, you're a political action committee, you were one of the activist leaders, you're one of the insurgents leaders there, and they jail them. And so, okay, we're going to throw all those people, all of our leaders, into jail over there at the Capitol. This is a spiral downward now. What happens is the government is trying to get control of the situation, not by addressing the grievance, but instead through propaganda and the use of violence against its own people. At some point, so this can go on. And this can go on for quite some time. And if you think, well, the government should solve that problem really, really quick, because what's going to happen is, time is on the insurgent side. Well, that's not exactly true. And if you study something like How Insurgencies End by the Rand Group, you'll find that something in the nature of 60% of cases, time was on the government side. And the insurgency didn't have long lines of resources and all of this other stuff. They didn't have funding, they didn't have leadership. And so eventually the insurgents run out of steam. It's to the insurgents' benefit to finish this quickly, and that's what they're trying to do through violence, but often that doesn't net anything for them. So instead, what the insurgents need to do is they need to seek sanctuary. Sanctuary? I think that's how we spell it. Let's pretend that's how we spell it. Now, sanctuary can be found in many different places. It can be found in the interior, as it was here in the United States, or the colonies at any rate, in the wilderness, where people could retreat and then rebuild their armies when they'd taken a licking, a la, Valley Forge. Or it can be found across a border or a boundary, say, into a sympathetic country. In the case of Fidel Castro in the island of Cuba, he went into Central America and found support there through, frankly, supported by communist dictates. And that started to sway his way of looking at things, though he was not a full-fledged communist yet. And anyway, so we have sanctuary across a border, a boundary. And this is very important because where is this military and police force and security force? Where are they ineffective? And if you guessed, well, across the border, then you guessed correctly. So now we've got to go back and put those blocks up again, those checkpoints, and really just shut down those borders, which further exasperates, of course, the economic problem. And so you see where this is going. This is where they begin to transition from the hidden clandestine insurgency into a guerrilla force. The effort of an insurgency is really twofold. One, it's to solve grievance, but when it cannot solve grievance through a legitimate government, then it seeks to replace that legitimate government and become the legitimate government. So it's very important that we recognize that. And in Sanctuary, that's why they're becoming a guerrilla force. What they really want is, F-16 jet fighters and B-2 bombers and M1 Abrams tanks, and they want to solve this against the enemy, but they simply don't have that. Strawberry Land probably isn't going to give them that, but they will send advisors and train them up into this guerrilla force where they can then sneak across the border and do, strikes against the army, ba-boom, again, another big conflict here and there, and eventually bring those strikes into the capital city, right? And so they're going to do multiple of these strikes. Invariably, the Blueberry people will also try to counter-strike and will risk often getting in a war with their neighbors as they seek out those sanctuaries and do counter strikes on them. And they see it as a matter of national defense. And they may be correct there, but it's a situation that government's building. And so this is what's going on here. Now, at one point or another, this continues to build until Sanctuary allows this guerrilla force now to transition back into Blueberry Land and take the fight as a guerrilla force against conventional military. You certainly saw this. I already brought up his name, so I'll say Castro certainly did this as a guerrilla force back into Cuba, and this built. He wound up joining forces with communist guerrillas as well as, capitalist guerrillas, and so they wound up joining forces, and it really wasn't overthrowing the regime there in Cuba was not a communist effort. I want to point that out. It could have been, and it certainly was in part, but it wasn't in whole, because that would have alienated people. And so it worked together with all these forces to eventually overthrow this, literally get tanks. America, if you remember, Will, started as the Castro and other guerrilla forces started having one success after another in Cuba. America started sending artillery and tanks and even some air support to Castro and his fellow compatriots in helping them overthrow the Blueberry People's Republic. So certainly that's what was going on, and you can see that transition. What's the point? The point is that from a guerrilla force, we want conventional victories and to develop ourselves into a conventional army. We're looking for that conventional victory. Let's say Yorktown, George Washington at Yorktown, with the wonderful support, of course, of the French Navy and French Army. And there was a defeat of the British military, Navy and Army. And so there was this fantastic conventional victory, which not only did the opposition, the enemy, recognize, but equally as important is that the people themselves recognized, oh, hold on, that's totally legit. We now have a conventional standing army led by a new government. And so what happens is we say, okay, now we can legitimately, and that's the key word, solve this problem. And that's, in the end, that's what you want to happen. Now, you cannot ask, okay, that's cool, but hey, Doc, what if that doesn't happen? What if they don't find legitimacy? What if they stay too long and they don't free their leaders? What if they can't find sanctuary? And what if they're persecuted? Well, one thing is that the insurgents can lose. The other thing, and I think this is in many cases more insidious, is that the insurgents will continue to try to fund their efforts through all sorts of crime, hostage taking for ransom, drug trafficking, all sorts of illegitimate activities, and eventually the insurgencies can slide dangerously into a crime cartel where they never solve their grievance with the government, but just slip into generations of crime against the government and eventually against each other and against the people, and they really just become an enemy of the state. And then you find out that, all the propaganda that the Blueberry People's Republic government said about these people winds up manifesting itself. And so that's kind of the transition then. We talked about that. You first start with a grievance. You try to solve this through political action committees so that you can, legitimately solve the grievance. And if that gets shut down or takes too much time or is, the government is seen as corrupt or not responsive, then we go to activists. And activists, again, start violence against, initially it's just protesting and getting their message out, but then it becomes violence against property. And then you see them start to transition into an insurgency, and the insurgency is violence against property until the government then attacks the insurgency, and then there's this huge escalation. The insurgency has to seek sanctuary, and from sanctuary they transition into a guerrilla force. From a guerrilla force, they seek conventional victories as a conventional force, and then legitimate governance of the region. And so this is the life cycle. This is the successful, otherwise known as the healthy life cycle of an insurgency. It's to solve a grievance, it's to do it with legitimacy and or go to illegitimacy so that we can move back to legitimacy. And it is constantly a fight over the people. If you say, well, it's a fight over the will of the people or the opinion of the people, that's actually quite true. Because again, in order to be seen as legitimate, either in the beginning, middle, or end, you have to have the support of the people. That is the tacit support, like I agree with you, the implicit support, or the direct support. Yep, I'm going to fund you, I'm going to arm you, I'm going to feed you, I'm going to cheer and wave flags for you. So that is the life cycle of a insurgency, and I think this is a really good place to start because there's a whole lot of myth here that, that insurgents want to be insurgents, that they don't want F-15 Eagles. Nah, that's not true. That time is on the on the benefit of the insurgents, and that is seldom the case. How long can they continue not working in their farms and funding this very expensive military operation? Frankly, it's better for everyone that these things end quickly, but they often don't, and they draw out for a generation or two or three. All right, thanks for sticking through with that. The reason I bring this up is that it's the best place to start. Again, I said earlier that with each one of the opposing antagonists or enemy, we have to understand their decision making from their cultural perspective. And so I think that's why it's very important to start with the insurgency life cycle when we talk about irregular warfare and asymmetric warfare. And that helps, with that in mind, that helps you understand their force structure, their individual missions, even their equipment and technology selections, why they do what they do within that cultural lens. And so we'll move forward on more irregular warfare here in the coming weeks and months. And again, this is going to be our point of reference, okay? Thanks for joining me today.